Hello, 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 and welcome back to Arts Respond on WNHH Community Radio. Arts Respond is a collaboration with our friends at the Arts Council of Greater New Haven. So shouting them out too. I'm Lucy Gellman, and today I'm very excited to be talking about the Lunar New Year and specifically Lunarfest, a wonderful festival from Yale, China that the pandemic has not been able to shut down. And my guests today are educator and artist, and soon to be very public artist and muralist, Caitlin Tan Fong and Neely No. Neely is, I'm pulling it up to make sure I don't get the title wrong, the author of Healing the Whole Family, a graphic novel about AAPI mental health. So first of all, I just want to welcome both of you to the show and say a happy Lunar New Year.
Thank you so much.
Happy Lunar New Year to you too.
Happy Lunar New Year. I know. I feel like I should be jumping up and down or something. And it's when we were still off mic, I was saying it's very gray and very wet outside. So it's hard to muster that celebration and joy. But dang it, we are going to do that during this hour together. So first, I love going into the Wayback Machine with folks and talking about what this time of year for both of you represents, not just this year, so we're in the third calendar year and almost the second full year of a global pandemic that has remained a moving target. And for artists, for authors, for educators, that has changed the way we're able to interact with the people we love around us. But also what this time of year has represented for both of you in the past as well. So whoever wants to jump in, I'm not going to call on people.
I guess I can start. Hey, this is Caitlin. This time of year has always represented like a great time with my family. It's always been about family and of course, great food. And the pandemic has changed a lot of things in terms of being able to meet together in person. We were able to have like a family dinner with some of my immediate family. And we had our steamboat dinner, which was really great. And I'm hoping that, that's just going to cause even more celebration in the future.
Yeah, and this is Neely, by the way, and I mirror a lot of those similar sentiments. The new year for me is about family and eating, like so much eating that it's kind of absurd. And the pandemic definitely has changed a lot of things, but I think like the New Year spirit is really strong in that like we try to do whatever we can. So for example, like I would just FaceTime and eat with my parents, and my parents would be like, "Are you okay?" Well, they have like the feast that my mom prepared versus I like got takeout from the local like shop. So it's really just about trying to still be together, given the circumstances, and enjoying every moment each of us have.
And Neely, I'm wondering if you can speak a little bit about the Chat Together initiative.
Yeah, of course. So Yale Chat Together is a group that was founded at Yale by this wonderful child and adolescent psychiatrist. Her name is Dr. Eunice Yuen. She created it actually kind of in response to the COVID-19 pandemic, because she saw how a lot of families, especially Asian American and AAPI families, were really struggling with this new stress of the pandemic. And it really kind of goes to address child-parent communications, just the mental health of families overall. And it does so through art-based initiatives. Its main arm is through theater and creating skits about child-parent communication, mental health, really highly stigmatized and tough topics to have with your kids. And it has various other arms as well. There's like a research arm where we're kind of working on collecting research, doing data analysis, and publishing what we've been able to find. And the arm that I'm also really heavily involved in is the other arts-based arm and education arm. I specifically work on making comics, and my most recent project was creating Healing the Whole Family, which is the graphic novel that you talked about at the beginning.
And I should say you're a little bit, so I know that we can say the word badass. The FCC allows that. So So not only are you involved in comics, but you're involved in medicine. And so Healing the Whole Family, I'm wondering if you can talk about how that project really is able to bring the two of those together. And then we'll chat a little bit about the role it plays in Lunarfest.
Oh, yeah, I would love to talk about that. It is a great title, and it actually came as a collaboration between me, Dr. Yen, and another person named Grace. And what happened was I kind of finished my first comic with Chat Together, and we published it on social media. And we kind of noticed that the reaction we were getting from people was very positive. Like people really responded positive to storytelling, to like visual art. And we were like, oh, wow, like this is a really cool medium. We should really try to experiment with this more. Because before then, Chat Together was publishing stuff on social media, but it was more like text-based things, like there would be graphics and things, but not like very heavy visuals. And then this wonderful person named Grace Chiang actually reached out to me, and she at the same time had just published an article called Healing the Whole Family in the New York Times. And she was like, I just saw your comic. I think we have really similar interests. Like, let's try to work together. And that's kind of how this whole project kind of started. I met with her. Turns out we went to the same undergrad together, which is also really serendipitous. And we kind of had this idea of, you know, art is like a really strong medium for telling stories. And your writing is already so incredible. Like, what if you try to combine the both of them? And Dr. Yen also kind of joined us as well and thought about how do we make this educational in some sense. So that's kind of how this project came about. So Healing the Whole Family is a graphic novel about taking Grace's story that she published in the New York Times and translating it into a visual format, so that it can, you know, perhaps reach more people that are more inclined to looking at pictures and visuals rather than just reading a story. We also tried to make it educational in the sense. So the back chapters of the graphic novel focus on teaching. There are certain sections that are devoted to talking about the greater themes in the book. So for example, a really strong theme is intergenerational trauma, as well as adverse childhood experiences. So there's a whole back section dedicated to talking about what exactly is that and what parts of the book kind of reference that and how does that tie into this greater story about, you know, intergenerational trauma and mental health in our communities. So that's how this entire project came to be. And for me personally, I actually started it during, I completed it during a huge chunk of COVID when I was a medical student, and kind of trying to balance like preclinical work and then transitioning into going into the hospital and taking care of patients. And it was so much to kind of take on at once, and art was really the space where I could just have control in my life, where I feel like there wasn't control, and it was therapeutic for me. So I really love doing it.
Uh, Caitlin, I want to bring you into this conversation and talk a little bit about both the Brilliant Boba initiative and the mural that you'll be working on, and how art, you know, the role of art and visual storytelling and also straight up storytelling in both of these is a device for cultural understanding.
Sure, absolutely. I had the incredible opportunity to work with Brilliant Boba. It just was a wonderful marriage of all of my passions, our education, learning about family histories, and also, um, AAPI narratives and voices and bringing those into a space that might have been marginalized or ignored before. So I had read a narrative called A Musical Prodigy, and it just really spoke to me. It was all about the matriarch of the family, Clara Shen, and how she had moved several places, how she brought her piano with her, and how music and art had always been a part of her life and her family's lives. And so, in reading that story, I created a family map and I painted that, and it's now on display at the Ely Center. So, that's really exciting. And it's just such an awesome opportunity because as an art teacher, like I thought about what kind of artwork would I want to curate and bring into the classroom and help teach my students about other people's lives and other people's cultures. And so I created the artwork that I would want to bring into the classroom. And in doing that, I was able to create a guide that hopefully other educators will find useful in using my artwork to help teach their students and their children. So that's
And
one way.
oh, sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, well, I do want to also talk about a project that will be going up on Audubon Street on February 15th. It's a community mural. But first, Harry Droz, who is the man making the magic happen behind the controls, I'm going to ask him to drop an article that Brian Slattery published either yesterday or the day before in the New Haven Independent that details that family map, in fact, that Caitlin, you just mentioned.
Oh,
Oh, sorry.
that's new to me.
Oh, well, it's a very nice article and Brian did a great job. And I definitely read it and thought, oh my goodness, I need to go get my butt to the Ely Center, which for folks who are listening and who are thinking, what's that? It's this wonderful old house on Trumbull Street in New Haven, and to see the work. So I also want to ask you about the community mural that will be going up on February 15th, barring any, crazy weather events, because we just don't know. I feel like this winter has been like, I'm not done with you yet.
Yes, absolutely. So, in working with Yale China and Emily Chu, I designed a mural. It's kind of a big surprise what the whole image is going to look like, because I took the design, I divided it into 42 squares, and those squares have been distributed to various community groups, schools, including the school that I teach at, and different community partners in the area. And I gave them some guidelines based off of my design. So I can tell you that majority of it will be red and gold, because red is a really lucky color. And it is about the year of the tiger. And that's like so special to me because my sister is a tiger, my akong was a tiger, and my future nephew is going to be a tiger. So it's a really bring in the art and family and just all the joy that we could possibly muster up in this time. So that will be on display starting February 15th.
That's so beautiful. And I'm actually wondering if we can go back to this first question of like how Lunar New Year is still continuing as we're in this like weird pandemic land. And I think we are realizing increasingly, Neely, I'm sure you realized this like way before the rest of us, because you were deep in it, that this thing is with us, right?
Yeah, I remember when I first started in the hospital, like doing my clerkships, a doctor I worked with was saying like, this is going to be endemic. And that was like really, really early on. And I was like, not in the space to kind of process that. But, with seeing all the articles saying basically the exact same thing, it looks like it's something that we're going to have to live with. So how do we like begin processing, these past couple of years? How do we start adjusting? How do we start making sure that we still prioritize things like family and happiness and well-being, things that I think the pandemic kind of forced us are really important, I think, in our lives, versus before we were kind of, working really hard, but maybe weren't happy with what was going on. And the pandemic made us kind of reprioritize. And I think the Lunar New Year is a great time to just kind of stop and reflect, because it's the time point of it is so nice, because like the new year has already kind of passed in like the Western calendar sense. So we kind of a month into the new year, we get another chance to kind of like stop and reset and reflect. And I really think that it's a great time to just kind of like see like what's around us, like what makes us happy, like what do we want to keep upholding in the new year, and what do we want to kind of maybe start phasing out. And just the emphasis on like family and like loved ones and just keeping up this energy, which we all really, really need right now.
Oh, Caitlin, I'm wondering also how it has changed and how you're celebrating this year. You mentioned your students, so I should say you're an art teacher at Elm City College Prep. Yeah, but I would love to know.
Sure. I love what you said, Neely, about how it's like another chance for us to step back and reset and reflect, especially since, like around this time, I've been doing a lot of reflection about what it looked like in the classroom before the pandemic hit and before everything changed. Um, and all of that time we spent in a remote setting and teaching remotely, and like imagine for yourself like what that would look like teaching art remotely. It was a bit of a struggle. It was challenging. And so now it's a time for us to all come together. Now we're back in the classroom. I mean, it doesn't look exactly the same, but it is a chance for us to bring all of those collective efforts back together. And that for me is what this mural is hoping to be. Like it's a chance for all of us to put our art together and put our brains together and make something really beautiful.
And I know that for both of you, this is such a duh question, and we sort of teased at it earlier in this discussion, but why the visual arts? What do the visual arts do that other thing, and not just the visual arts, the arts more broadly, because I want to just shout out Annie Lynn and Emily Chu, who are the brilliant, brilliant minds behind Lunarfest. It would not happen without either of them. So Annie or Emily, if you're listening, or if you do listen to this, thank you, thank you, thank you for just giving this gift to our community. It is also one of the few things that really, truly bridges town and gown, but that's a whole other episode. But why, what are we achieving through the arts that we can't be, that doesn't get done if it's just a discussion or just a roundtable?
I can try to address this question. It's a really great question. And I love hearing other artists talk about their work too, because it kind of brings it that personal level. But for me, I think it started because my mom is an artist. She does Chinese watercolor. And so I grew up like more familiar with like bamboo brushes and watercolor than, like building blocks or or whatever. So I idolized her when I was a kid, and I still do now. And her art and how she could bring like such beauty with just like her hands. And as I kind of grew up, I have always kind of had it with me at every stage of life, like in high school and college, and now in medical school and graduate school. And I feel like art does different things for me, depending on what I need. I think as a medical student, there's so much emphasis on like science and logic and reason and hard truth and these very kind of like cold, clear, and concise topics, which is very understandable for a field like medicine. It's very evidence based, but I was kind of struggling with this lack of the humanities in my life the first 2 years of medical school, which as I was a history major at Yale, and I loved the humanities. And as an extension, like I loved art because the way that they interact with each other is so salient and how they speak to the human experience and just make it more relatable in ways that I felt the hard sciences were kind of hard for me to connect in that sense. So as a medical student, and I'm actually taking a gap year for medicine to do public health right now, so still kind of grounded in the sciences, art really brings this this side of like the human experience. It brings this side of this is how I connect with people. Like the fields of medicine and public health give me the knowledge that I would need to be able to help people, but art gives me the ability to connect to those people. And without art, I can't really do my job of being a future doctor or a public health leader. Like I need that connection somehow. And for me, I think art and drawing comics and graphic novels that kind of speak to this greater experience about medicine and mental health kind of allows me to become a better doctor in a sense, because it allows me to be a better communicator and a better connector. So I don't know if that answered your question.
It does. It does. And I want to shout out moms everywhere too, because they really are like the OG role models.
They do so much.
Caitlin, what about you?
Sure. I would absolutely agree with what you said, Neely. Like, as an art teacher, I feel like sometimes I can butt heads with people who are in the like more core subjects and academics. And so there is like this fight to call us like essentials teachers because art is what makes us human. Like we need it. Scholars for our students, right? They need an outlet for creativity. They need to be able to grow their brains in more ways than one. And art is that way for a lot of them. I also find art incredibly healing. Just to bring it back to what you were saying too, Neely, that like prior to becoming an art teacher, I looked into possibly becoming an art therapist because I think art is just an incredible avenue for like everyone in any possible setting to explore. And so, yeah, thinking back to those remote days of teaching, like, and having our kids like still continue to be able to do art, I think that was just so important for them to have that as a way to express themselves, especially during a time when like no one really knew what was going on.
And do you also, Neely, feel free to jump in, but Caitlin, do you also feel, because I know that in the same way that like schools just don't teach history that is outside of whiteness, or that is their default. And so I'm wondering if, especially with this collaborative project, it's been a chance for your students and for other students within New Haven to learn about Lunar New Year, because I know that growing up, just no one taught me about Lunar New Year. And I got to my 20s and thought, why do I have to be in my 20s learning about this beautiful, beautiful celebration?
Oh, sure, absolutely. I think my school does an incredible job with honoring many different cultures and making sure that even if like we don't have scholars who represent those cultures, we're still teaching them about it. And so that makes me really energized and excited to go to work every day because I feel like I'm part of a community that really celebrates like all kinds of people. But I am excited about Brilliant Boba going into different schools because that might not be the case everywhere else. And as I think we can say that it isn't the case everywhere else. So that makes me excited.
And I grew up in Oklahoma City, so not a ton of Asians in the area, but I did have a very strong there was a very strong like Vietnamese and Korean population like in Oklahoma at the time. So I learned a lot about Lunar New Year just from like my friends and my peers and going to my parents' temples and celebrating in the New Year, and I thought that was like amazing for me to kind of grow up in this place that where a lot of people didn't really look like me, but the few who did were so fiercely proud of their heritage and their culture, that's carried with me all this way here. And now I currently live in New York City where, you know, I could just take the subway 40 minutes downtown and be in Chinatown and watch the celebrations. But I think what you pose is a really interesting question about like what history gets taught in schools, and why is it important that we teach many different types of history and not just the ones that get repeated over and over again, even though those are also very valid and important. And that was a topic that kind of came up as Annie and me were kind of brainstorming this event for Lunarfest. Is um, what how do we want to kind of use this graphic novel as a way to like springboard the conversation into topics like Asian history. Do we get taught Asian history in schools? Is it important that we teach Asian history in schools? How does that relate to topics like intergenerational trauma? If I don't know the background of where my parents came from, how can I understand, what things they went through and how those things might affect their current relationships and dynamics with each other? So it's like an extremely important question, and I'm really glad you posed it. And I think art and history and the humanities can do a lot of work to kind of go towards that and ask those questions that people might not be thinking about.
Yeah. And is it also something, so in Connecticut, we're very lucky to finally have had this piece of legislation that passed in, I think, late 2020, December 2020 was the state ed board giving it the final green light for Black and Latinx studies. But there's been a lot of discussion, especially among folks who lead the Anti-Racist Teaching and Learning Collective in the state, about having similar legislation for an AAPI studies curriculum and also for an Indigenous studies curriculum. And for both of you, both, is that something you'd like to see? And then for any educators who might be listening, and I hope there are, and they say, well, I don't have time to wait around for the state legislature to do this because it's going to take multiple cycles, most likely. How can they be implementing that in their classrooms right now?
Yes, absolutely, 100%. I see things like Black history is world history, Black history is American history, and that is the case for Asian Americans as well, and Indigenous peoples. One way I would say educators who are ready to jump in, I've been reading a graphic novel that a colleague of mine suggested, The Best We Could Do. And yes, Neely.
I love that book so much. I cried. Like 100% recommend too.
Yes. And next up, I'm gonna read yours, Neely. So that is like literature, graphic novels, incredibly motivating for students to read because they're just captivated by the imagery and the visual aspect of it. And that's a way to get those stories across.
Yeah, I think that's a wonderful idea. And I think, I think teachers have so much responsibility put on them. And we've seen during the pandemic how important they truly are. And some of the things I've kind of seen from the public health field is that collaborations are super important. So, I love the idea of like introducing these autobiographical graphic novels, like The Best We Could Do. So like partnerships between maybe teachers and libraries of being like, oh, we're going to do like a reading week. And each week we choose a book that, would appeal, like maybe a graphic novel or something else that would appeal to students, and kind of hosting that in conjunction with teachers, so that they, it's not all entirely on them to kind of try to manage everything and teach everything, because we have such amazing resources in our library system and a lot of these publicly funded institutions that can do a long way. And I love this book so much also because I think it prompts questions in kids to kind of think about their own parents and like, oh wow, like, because my dad is Vietnamese Chinese, and so reading that book made me think a lot about like, what did he have to go through to come here? And so I think getting resources like that and kind of helping kids to reach out to their own parents as resources of history as well, I think would be very powerful, because kind of bridging this intergenerational divide that I think a lot of kids who grow up in the States and kind of feel distant from their culture have to kind of grapple with.
Yeah, I think that's true. And then, the other thing is I've been very aware of this push-pull where I think in 2020 and then into last year, unfortunately, because of just the huge and very scary rate of violence that was happening against folks who identified as AAPI, there was a lot of awareness. There was a lot of speaking out. There was a lot of allyship that I saw from folks who did not identify as AAPI. And then at the same time, you have pushback. And I think within history, like this is kind of the push-pull. You have Reconstruction and then you have Jim Crow, for instance. And I'm wondering if going into this month of celebration, you are feeling that that folks are still committed, that commitment is still there, even as we're hearing, in I think one or two towns over, there was a big hullabaloo about critical race theory not so long ago, and so we're in this even in Connecticut, which is a purple if not blue state.
That's a hard question.
I also asked it in a way that was not at all. It was like very
no,
so I'm sorry.
not at all. You're good. I mean, I think it's a hard question because it kind of gets to the crux of why this is so difficult, because it requires people to care like consistently, which like at its surface level sounds like, oh yeah, duh, like people care, but I feel like something that's been super difficult, at least with me with the COVID pandemic, is that like some people don't care. And in situations where I feel like, this is as politically neutral as it should be. But so I think the Lunar New Year is a great time for like AAPI like communities to kind of show their visibility and show that we're just like any other Americans, like, or any other communities that you would see. Like we care for each other. We're here to celebrate like each other's existence. We're here to kind of mark the passing of the new year. Like there's nothing so alien about us as a community that would make us seem less than whatever idea you have of like this wholesome community in your head. So I feel like the Lunar New Year is a great time for people to celebrate like their own communities. And I think in doing so, that would hopefully get people to see, API like communities in a more positive light if they haven't seen before, or just acknowledge that we are visible. And, we're not this like model minority, the silent minority that just kind of deals with whatever we get handed with. Like we have our own struggles too, but we also have our own things that we want to fight for. We have our own things that we're happy about. But that's a really tough question. And I don't know. I'm curious, Caitlin, to hear from like an educational perspective, like what you think about it.
Oh, so tough. But yeah, in terms of thinking about, it's just been, I guess since all of these have come to light, right? It's been hard to see the duality in things and be like, this is a joyous time, but it's also a really tough and challenging time, because in some spaces it does remind us of our otherness. And so I'm not sure I have the answers really. It's just it is a time to reflect and think on like, where are we now? Like obviously I think in a lot of ways it is better than it's been, because there's more awareness. Like I go on Instagram and boom, like there are all these infographics. There's a lot more celebration. There's a lot more education, but it does remind us like how it's been in the past and how invisible, like, because it's not new, like API attacks and these instances, but there is more awareness about it. And so it's like, I feel like that in a way it's something to highlight and like reflect on, and now think forward, like where are we going with this? What can we do to prevent these things happening? And how can we highlight the stories of joy and resilience and happiness that are existing in all communities as well as ours?
Well, I want to get back to talking about the joy and resilience, and also recommend, Harry, if you're listening, and you could drop a link to The Best We Could Do in the social media platforms, just to let folks know how to find that book, and also to Lloyd Su's The Chinese Lady, which was at Long Wharf Theater last year, and talks pretty directly, Caitlin, to some of the long history that you're referring to, that the fact that none of this is new. But I want to get back to the celebration and ask both of you, what you are really excited about within the Lunarfest lineup, and then also, celebrating Lunar New Year yourselves.
I can start. Like I said, I was excited to like have a lot of great food with my family. We had our steamboat dinner, and that's how we celebrate Lunar New Year here. Is a time to like come together and just celebrate each other and all those moments together. In terms of the Lunarfest lineup, I'm excited to be a part of it. This is my first time like directly being part of this awesome group of people and putting my work out there. Like it's been a process, but I'm excited for all of those pieces to come together. I did mention to you, Lucy, earlier that I'm a little nervous because, you put your work out there and you have people, you're relying on a lot of different people to come together and create that community mural. But I am excited for it to go up and for it to be out in the open for people to see, as well as all of the awesome events that are put together for Lunarfest.
And I do want to say, in my experience, New Haven has been a village, so I think that village will show up for you. I think people are very excited about this. I won't talk about what it is, just that it's a really cool community art project. But I have heard, as recently as yesterday, I was talking to someone on the phone and they said, "Oh my God, you know Caitlin?" And I said, well, we don't know each other, but I'm having her on the radio, and they got so excited for this project. And so I think that there is a lot of love and a lot of excitement.
Yeah, similarly, I'm so stoked. I am celebrating the new year in New York for the first time of my life ever. And so I'm really excited to just go down and see the festivities, because I think last year the parade was canceled because of COVID, but it's coming back this year. So just hanging out with friends, like eating good food. I love to take photographs, and actually Lunarfest is super dear to my heart because I used to go to college at Yale, and as a senior, I was part of the social media photography team for Yale. And my first assignment ever was to cover Lunarfest in 2018. And I just I was like, when he gave it to me, I was like on the verge of tears because I was like, I had to cover such an important topic. So I'm super excited for this lineup. It looks beautiful. Annie and Emily and everyone at the Yale China team always does a phenomenal job with it. And so I'm just excited for everything. And I want to see the mural. Oh my gosh, it's so exciting. Oh, goodness. I could
We're only a short train ride away, as you know.
Yes, come visit us. And thank you, Lucy, for saying that. I do feel the love. I do have faith in our community. I just want to reassure you all that these are just personal, nervous feelings as an artist that you always get putting your work out there. But I do appreciate all of the support.
Well, I want to thank both of you so much for coming on this episode of Arts Respond. And Neely, you inspired me to look up old photos that probably are not as good as yours from that 2018 parade, which was celebrating the year of the dog on Whitney Avenue, which was so special. But this year will also be special. But the last question I always ask folks, especially artists, because I think it's really important, is how are you caring for yourselves during this time? How are you taking care of your hearts?
I think for me, art is just a therapeutic outlet for me. So I started my second week of class. I guess I'm finishing. I don't even know what day it is. It's Friday. Okay. And it's always so busy and crazy. And I'm kind of running around, overly caffeinated, just, crazy. And art just gives me that moment to just kind of take time for myself and just stop and just admire things around me and appreciate things around me. So for me, that's art. And during Lunar New Year, I'm actually really stoked to have an event for the Lunarfest lineup, which is we're inviting people to kind of come join us. We're going to read part of the graphic novel together and get people's responses, their thoughts, and then we're going to have this amazing panel with a lot of mental health care providers to kind of come on and talk about everything we kind of talked about today, like mental health, intergenerational trauma, how important the historical context is. And I feel like events like that are also super healing because it's being able to kind of talk about us and the things that we go through in just this open, special space. So I'm super excited for all of it. And I hope people who are interested can also come and also read the book. It's all online. So.
In terms of caring for my heart, I journal every day. I have 3 journals. I have a gratitude journal. I have a journal for like important events of the day, and one that has like a question of the day, so I can reflect back on my answers from previous years. Um, and I do really appreciate what you said, Neely, that like I see art in everything I do, even if I'm not actively drawing or painting. Like art is in the way that I make my coffee in the morning. Art is in the way that I communicate with a child during the day. Art is in the way you hug a loved one. So I think coming into any space with a mindset that what you're experiencing is art is a way to heal too. So that's how I care from the heart.
Oh, well, I want to thank both of you so much. And Caitlin, may your nephew have a safe and easy entry into the world. We're excited to welcome him, on this side of the earth. For folks who are listening out there, you can catch the Lunarfest community mural. I won't say anything more about it at 77 Audubon Street, starting, I almost said Thursday, but it's a Tuesday, February 15th. And if you want to register for Healing the Whole Family, a graphic novel about AAPI mental health, that panel discussion is on February 24th at 6:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And you can register at a link that we are dropping in the chat that will take you to all of the Lunarfest activities, which I should also say all of them are free, which is an incredible, incredible resource for the community. So again, thank you, Annie Lynn and Emily Chu. If you're listening, we really, really love you. Thank you both so much for coming on the show, and my heartfelt thanks to Harry Droz, who is making this possible. Take care, everyone, and Happy Lunar New Year.